Mr. Mayor, we're now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of Ajax Council is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and senior town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. So I'll now call this meeting to order. Start with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Does any member of council have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Adoption of the minutes. We have moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Bauer that the following minutes of previous council meetings be adopted. Regular meeting of January 25th, 2021 and the closed session meeting of January 25th, 2021. Any question or comments or errors and omissions on the minutes? Hearing, seeing none. Those in favor? Approval. I see all hands. That's carried. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, does any member of the public have they put any questions forward for tonight during question period?
Mr. Mayor, we have not received any questions for question period. However, we did receive 2 requests to make delegations on item 7.4.2 tonight, which will require a suspension of the rules to allow.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to delegations and presentations, we have 2. Item 5.1, upgrades at the Devons Creek Water Pollution Control Plant. We have John Presta, Director of Environmental Services, Region of Durham. Mr. Presta, are you here?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Collier, members of Ajax Council, to inviting me to provide this brief presentation on the upgrades. Next slide. The upgrades involve basically 2 main components. They're recommendations out of the EA and the Phosphorus Reduction Action Plan. First one is work that has to be done at the outfall, which includes replacing the check valves underwater with new variable diameter check valves. And then within the treatment plant itself, there's liquid treatment process upgrades related to ferric chloride addition and polymer addition and installing current baffles. These upgrades are all to improve the reduction of phosphorus during the plant treatment process. Next slide. This provides a schematic of the outfall where the treated effluent is discharged into this outfall, which is a 3 meter diameter pipe, extends underneath the lake approximately 1.1 kilometers. Treated effluent is discharged at the end of the pipe where there are diffusers. These are smaller pipes that come out on the lake bed where the treated effluent is discharged and mixed into the lake. Currently, there's 63 ports and 38 of those ports are open. Next slide. This just provides a close-up of the, each port will be removed and a new variable diffuser port will be installed on the outfall diffusers on all the 68 diffusers. Next slide. This provides a schematic of the treatment process. At the bottom half of the slide. On the left-hand side, the raw water comes into preliminary treatment, goes through tanks, primary clarifiers, bioreactors, and secondary clarifiers. It's disinfected and discharged to improve with the phosphorus reduction recommendations. The ferric chloride dose points are being upgraded, and there's an addition of polymer points being added at the primary clarification. And thirdly, as mentioned, current baffles will be installed at the secondary clarifiers. I'll have a better slide as we go on. Next slide. This shows an aerial shot of the Duffins Creek Water Pollution Control Plant. Little red triangles show where the ferric chloride is being applied at the plant, at the primary and during the bioreactors. All these points will be upgraded to ensure better mixing and operational flexibility to ensure the phosphorus objectives can be met. Next slide. This slide shows where primary polymer addition is going to be added to the plant. That's basically the little triangles with the purple or fuchsia color. They will be added so that when there's higher plant flows that go through the plant during wet weather, we'll be able to ensure that we can meet those phosphorus objectives. Next slide. On the bottom left of the slide shows the round tanks where the older part of the plant, and on these round tanks, the secondary clarifiers, we need to install density baffles around the tanks. This will help with secondary effluent quality so that the solids don't get flow into the effluent weirs in these round tanks. So this work will be only done where we are at the existing round tanks, and the photo on the right hand side shows an empty tank. Next slide. So in terms of the project schedule and status, preliminary design is complete for the outfall and the process upgrades. Detailed design and approvals, we are hoping to get that completed by the end of March of this year. Tendering, there'll be two contracts. The contract for the marine work related to the work proposed underwater for the outfall, and then the work within the plant where the additions of the ferric chloride polymer and the baffles work is being done. So tender usually takes 6 to 12 months. Construction on the plant site, 26 to 30 months. Outfall work in Lake Ontario, 9 months. That work may start this year if we get all the approvals and the new variable diffusers are procured from the supplier. So as noted, approximately we estimate 4.5 years to complete this work, and we'll be on track to meet the MOE's requirement to complete it in 5 years. Next slide. The next couple slides just show the plant performance from last year, from January to December, on total phosphorus concentration and total effluent phosphorus load throughout the year. We are meeting even without the upgrades right now, we are meeting the requirements of the phosphorus reduction plans, phosphorus reduction action plan. And so the plant is performing well. Next slide. and also with final effluent soluble reactive phosphorus concentrations are low, being discharged from the plant. And I believe, Mayor Collier, that's it. Available for questions. Next slide.
To council, I had the viewing screen moved off so I could see the presentation, so I might not have seen your hand. So far I have Councilors Crawford and Tyler Moran. Councilor Crawford, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Presta, for your presentation. For the better part of my political career here in Ajax, we have been working to fight to figure out where the nuisance algae has come from. We did put a lot of money and time into a study that showed that it came from this plant. I don't see any mention of tertiary treatment in this plant, in this plan.
Through the mayor.
In this plan, so making it a question, is there a reason why we're not seeing tertiary treatment in this presentation?
Well, through the mayor, thank you for the question. The question related to the work that was done by Ajax and whether tertiary treatment is required, that was, I guess, reviewed with the province in terms of the necessity, and a decision was made as part of the plant environmental assessment and as part of the further work that was done by the Outfall EA and the Phosphorus Reduction Action Plan, that that decision was rested with the province, and they came back saying that it was not required. So there was definitely a difference of an opinion.
Yeah, I suppose it's like if you talk to 4 different lawyers, you'll get 4 different opinions, right? So can you go back to the stuff you're going to be putting into, I can't remember the names of them. What is in your best estimation, the effectiveness of what you're planning to treat the affluent with to keep the bad stuff from going into Lake Ontario?
Well, through the mayor, the proposed upgrades are generally to reduce phosphorus loadings and concentrations from the plant. In terms of nuisance algae, it is definitely a more complex issue, and there's really no silver bullet as far as I'm aware, based on the Great Lakes scientists that have done work on Lake Ontario, that it's not just, you can't get rid of the nuisance algae just from related to the plant discharges. It's there's a variety of other factors that are related to nuisance algae developing not only on the shore of Ajax, but also along most of the north shore of Lake Ontario.
Well, with all due respect, we believed our silver bullet was the tertiary treatment, actually. But again, the treatment that you're proposing to put into that, do you have a percentage of how that will reduce the effects going into the lake?
Yeah. Through the mayor, yes. I mean, we'll be able to achieve approximately 95% phosphorus removal from the Duffins Creek Water Pollution Control Plant.
And one last question, if you let me, Mr. Mayor, or Your Worship, is this all in preparation for Lake Simcoe's, with York Region planning to increase the flow?
Through the mayor, this work was required as I mentioned, following the decision from the Outfall EA and the PRAP study, and it was moving forward regardless of the Upper York solution decision from the province. So
okay,
It's not the proposed upgrades are not related to a decision on the Upper York system.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions. Thank you, Your Worship.
You're very welcome. Councillor Tyler Moore, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Presta. Thank you for your presentation. Could you speak very quickly, as it's going to be a long meeting, in regards to the funding for the Outfall diffuser upgrades? Just just speak to not so much how much it'll cost, but where the money ultimately comes from. Please.
Sure. Through the mayor, the project is approximately about a $12 million upgrade, and that's funded both from York and Durham. So 80% of the costs will be from York and 20% from Durham. And that's generally based on utilization of capacity. We usually set that prior to undertaking the projects, and
Okay.
that is funded combination of mostly user rates but also development charges, because it does free up capacity for growth both in Durham and York.
Okay, so just confirming there's no financial implications or commitment from the town of Ajax. I know it's only one taxpayer, we always say, but the funding comes from the region and from the province.
Yeah, this project is the funding is 100% responsibility from the regions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Preston. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further questions from members of council? I just have a couple, Mr. Presta. Given the plant now, and it's going to be used, said I think 4.5 years till these efficiencies are put in. If nothing changes, if the Lake Ontario solution does not happen and the Lake Simcoe solution stays in place, how long will this plant be able to operate before an expansion would be needed in its current form?
Yeah, through the mayor, we suspect that it will be in the order of approximately 20 years before a major expansion is required at the plant. So 2041, in that sort of ballpark timeframe.
And if the Lake Ontario solution is decided by the province, same question. I understand there is enough capacity now, but I'm also guessing that will accelerate the need for a plant expansion.
Yeah, through the mayor, we would right now, because of there's a lot of uncertainty of when things are going to happen. Generally, I would provide you with the same answer. It's 2041, because planning, if York has proposed growth in their region, and so does Durham. So right now, based on the information, it's in that ballpark, 20, 25. You know, if Upper York doesn't come, it's probably 5 years. It adds 5 more years to the plant, roughly. But without doing a detailed, both regions are undergoing a municipal comprehensive review, and until really those are both complete, we can do and we get better planning numbers from everyone. It's in the 20 to 25 year time frame where the plant will require expansion.
Okay. If the Lake Ontario solution is chosen, the regions of York have already spent in excess of $100 million over the last 10 years on their environmental assessment. How many years would it be until we start seeing the increase from the twinning of the pipe if the Lake Ontario solution is chosen?
Through the mayor, again, we would right now, because there hasn't been any sort of decision from the province or any type of work, planning or engineering work for the Lake Ontario solution, we'd probably anticipate approximately like an 8-year time frame before that Lake Ontario solution is in place.
Okay, so these enhancements or these efficiencies will be installed by then. We've got baseline data, and I guess what you have now would be the baseline data. I know there's a difference in opinion between the regions and our science on what the cause of our nuisance algae is. But once this expansion, if it does happen, not the expansion, if the Lake Ontario solution is chosen, and in 8 years, we see a significant increase in our nuisance algae situation, I'm interested what your opinion would be as far as the source, because right now it's no, it couldn't possibly be this plant, even though our science has shown very clearly that it's this plant. What would happen at that point?
Well, I mean, what I can say is that we continue to monitor on an annual basis, and we have to, the discharge of the Duffins Creek Water Pollution Control Plant. So we will have that information. And on top of that, both York and Durham, we monitor water quality in Lake Ontario on the near shore with TRCA. So we will have additional data and water quality information, which a Great Lakes scientist can review at that time.
Okay, so I guess we'll have 3.5 years to one, gauge how effective these efficiencies were in lowering the current standard or the current emissions, and then also baseline data for if the Lake Ontario solution is chosen on any increase due to the York waste.
Yes, we'll have, we will definitely have that information.
Okay, and how often will you be reporting back on that information? Is this going to be an annual type thing as the efficiencies go ahead, so council can see and regional council can see, you know, if we're tracking down?
Yeah, I mean, the through yourself, the performance of the plant, the performance reports are on the Durham's website in terms of loading. And,
Okay.
and in terms of, we also have, as part of the upgrades, we do have an advisory committee that both Ajax and Pickering and the region sits on with TRCA. And if there's any, that provides an opportunity to present the information. And if you'd like me to come back in a year or two, would be available to present and possibly with TRCA if you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any further questions from members of council? Seeing, hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Presta, for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to our next delegation, we have Grandview Children's Center Capital Build Update. Lorraine Sundstrom-Mann, CEO, Grandview Children's Center. Lorraine, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you tonight. It's my pleasure to provide an update about Grandview Kids in general, but of course, most importantly, about our Grandview Build project. Next slide, please. So just for those of you, a reminder about what we do at Grandview, and we have the pleasure, of course, of serving all kids and families who require our services across Durham region. We've been providing services since 1953, and we are so excited to be at the launch of a very exciting redevelopment. Next slide, please. In the last year, a very challenging year, but of course, Grandview services have remained open during COVID. And we have provided, we will provide about 100,000 visits this year, very similar to activity of last year. That's about 130,000 hours of therapy. And that provides services and supports to the 19,000 Durham region families who are now requiring our services. With our existing resources, last year we were able to provide services to 9,000 of those families. And you know our story about our wait list and the reason that we need our new project. Next slide, please. So we are providing, of course, in addition to all of our specialized services, many of the supports that you're very familiar with, physio, occupational therapy, the other supports on the slide. In addition, we are growing our vision as a center of excellence for pediatrics. And in particular, I would like to bring to your attention Developmental Pediatrics. We have the wonderful fortune of having Dr. Carolyn Hunt as our medical director. And in the last few years, we have grown our Developmental Pediatrics department such that we will have 4 full-time developmental pediatricians working with an array of specialists and surgeons, in addition to 2 new psychologists that have come on stream. And so that vision for taking our Children's Treatment Center for services to that real vision of a center for excellence really is evolving. And we're quite excited about the opportunity we have to position Grandview Children's Centre within Durham Region as a leading center in the province of Ontario. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about where we're at with the new Grandview Kids. Next slide. This slide I'd like to spend a little bit of time on. This is a slide depicting where we're at in the work that we're doing. The project that we have in front of us is of a nature that it has warranted a P3 model in the province of Ontario. And so we are working through our vision of our project with Infrastructure Ontario and our ministry, which is the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services in Ontario. And we will be partnering with the private sector to build our project. There are 2 key phases of this work, and we've referred to it as writing the recipe, or the work that you see on the left of the slide, and then building the cake, the work on the right. So since last June, we have been working very hard at ensuring that when we are ready to issue the final RFP to the winning bidding team, that we will have clarified our project such that we can build it and be sure that we are getting what we've been dreaming of for so long. So over the last year, in addition to what you see there as the functional program, the test fit, and background documents, including many of the geotechnical and other environmental studies, we've been led by a group, B+H Architects, who are a planning, design, and conformance team. And their job has been to guide us through the writing of the output specifications documents, which will be included in the request for proposal when we tender the project, which is coming up very soon. And it's one of the reasons that I'm here tonight to talk to you about our project. The output specifications document embedded in the RFP includes a lot of work that has been completed with stakeholders, with clients, with our staff, with families, ensuring that we are going to get the kind of project and building that is required in terms of supporting the services at Grandview Children's Centre. So included in the writing the recipe section, we have recently awarded an RFQ to 3 firms who responded, indicating that they would be qualified to bid on our RFP when it gets released. That was a very significant project in itself, the RFQ, and the recent announcement of the 3 finalists who will be receiving the RFP went out recently. There are 3 teams. One is Amico and Sasser, working with HH Angus and Parkin. The second is Ellis Dawn, working with Montgomery Sizem. And the third is Pomerleau, working with Stantec. And those 3 firms will be getting the RFP document, which they will then work through the RFP open period to win the final opportunity to build Grandview, one of those teams. So the reason I'm here tonight relates to part of that. When we release the RFP, and that's targeted now for June, when we release the RFP, we need to ensure that the land that has been donated so graciously by Ajax is actually in the hands of Grandview so that we can manage all of the contractual obligations. So in your agenda package tonight, there is a report from staff requesting that we have another amendment to our agreement of land transfer, and that we would change the date to transfer that land to March 10th. That's part of the package that you have later on in your meeting. I just want to talk a little bit about baking the cake. When we release the RFP in June, the 3 teams that I mentioned will compete with each other on their project design, such that we will select a final bidder who will initiate the construction of Grandview, with the new building set to be completed in 2024 for occupancy. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the site plan, just for those of you who maybe haven't seen this for a while. And it's a very boring slide for the reason that we are about to go into RFP. And so much of, we have to be very careful about what we're putting out about the project to date. So just to orient you to this is the curved road at Harwood. Where the words site plan are is sort of the meadow between our property and J. Clark, Richardson, and Notre Dame School. So you're seeing our property with the dark gray showing where we're anticipating parking at the front and side of the building. The rectangle is not how we envision the building, but it's simply to demonstrate square footage of the building on the parcel of land. And then of course, toward the back of the property, that lovely treed woodlot where we envision having a sensory trail. Just south to the rectangular area showing the square footage, about 106,000 square foot building is where we're planning. You'll see a dotted line, long, narrow parcel. That is a parcel that we're in conversation with the owner regarding a donation in order to achieve enough parking for a facility that size. And we are working through a variance committee related to that. And so that meeting is happening this week as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a depiction. In addition to growing exponentially our organization, we are literally growing up in a vertical expansion in our design expectations. We are anticipating, again, 106,000 square foot facility with about 5 stories. The slope of that land is very interesting, such that to the right of the slide is the part of the building that would be facing Harwood. And you can see that you would come in on the first floor, which is that blue depicted area, to the main atrium or lobby. But at the back of the property, that lavender color is actually where we envision the school. So they would have a main entry, if you will, but actually be on the 2nd floor. And then the rest of the organization throughout the remainder of the floors. Next slide, please. I can't give away too much. Again, this is not the final design, but a little bit of our imagination that we've been playing with as we've been writing the output specifications. We've had to draw so that our staff could get a sense so that we could put into words what we require. This is a depiction of how we imagine the 1st floor, and I wanted to show it to you because of its community connection. At the far left of the slide is the main entrance coming into a grand lobby. Immediately to the left are change rooms leading into the pool and the therapy pool. In addition, on this floor, beside the sort of sage-colored green, the lighter gray is a family resource center. Very welcomed growth in our organization so that families can connect with each other as well as access resources. Across the hall in the lighter gray are some meeting rooms. We can see the tables and chairs depicted there. Imagining holding community meetings, teaching and education and workshop sessions in the evenings for families. This floor would also contain a small cafe where we hope that we'll be able to offer employment to Grandview graduates, as well as an opportunity for people to gather. And in addition, our foundation, our building services team, and the executive team of Grandview available on the 1st floor to be connecting to the public. The other floors have really exciting features in the therapy spaces, as well as an open space concept all staff floor, so that staff are able to, in between their therapy sessions, have touchdown space We're using a hoteling concept for staff who also do work in the community. So we've really spent a lot of time to ensure a very efficient and creative building. We've had some great work by students who have won an award, in fact, on helping us think about sensory guidelines for this facility so that children can have an experience in the center, but also we can be thoughtful to the different needs that children have while they're interacting with our building, including color, noise, vibration, and texture. So we've had a lot of opportunity to work with families and staff and clients to make sure we're thinking about all of those important aspects. Next slide, please. Wanted to share a little bit of some of the fun we've been having, thinking about this building and the opportunity we have to make sure it's really something very special. We've talked a lot about the fact that this is a facility for children and families and youth, and we want it to have texture and we want it to be playful. We want it to be very inviting and warm. And so architectural identity has been an important conversation. Next slide, please. In addition, of course, the interiors, a place that's welcoming for children, a lot of color and light and artwork, a lot of attention to the materials that we'll be using, really an opportunity to think about not only a place to come for therapy, but we've been using some words to describe this facility, and the word belonging has been part of that discussion, so that it really is a place for children and families to feel as though they belong and can really interact not only with each other and their therapist, but with the facility. Next slide. So I want to bring you back to,
you go ahead,
sorry.
Sundstrom Man, I just wonder, how many more slides do you have?
I think this is the last one or two.
Okay, because we are quite a bit over your 5 minutes, so I just wanted to see. Go ahead, please.
This is I think you've seen this slide before, just that notion, that vision that has been propelling us for many years about a pediatric center of excellence in Durham really is coming to fruition through the work that we've been doing in our program development, and of course the design that we've been writing in the output specs about what we expect in this facility. Next slide, please.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the opportunity for the brief update. And thank you very much for your attention to the request for the moving of the date to March of this year for the land transfer. It's very appreciated.
Thank you. And if you'd had a few left, I would have had to ask for a motion for an extension, but we didn't have to. So thank you very much for your presentation. And I have two hands so far, Councillor Tyler Moore and then Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I have to always take the opportunity whenever I hear Ms. Sundstrom at a meeting just to thank you again. There is a question. Thank you again for the amazing work you do in our community. It's the kind of thing where we tap into it when we're here and we're talking to you, but every single morning you guys get to work. Recently, I saw a little 16-month-old girl who got help from from Grandview. Their family was so stressed, and it's palpable. I see the family more settled now. The little girl's doing great. And I see adults, young adults that have gone through the program. So thank you again so much for all the great work you do in our community. And my question is, once this all comes to fruition, will everything be under this umbrella, or you'll still have satellite offices across Durham, or will all the families come to our beautiful town of Ajax?
Thank you so much. Many, many families will come to the beautiful town of Ajax. Because we do support all of Durham region, we will be keeping a satellite in the north to support families who live in Port Perry and north of Port Perry, as well as a satellite in the east. We're having a lot of growth out past Bowmanville, Newcastle, Newtonville, Orno area. So we have a satellite there now that's small. We'll probably expand that. And we will be keeping our satellite location in Oshawa in one of the high needs neighborhoods. But the majority of the activity, we will be referring to the Ajax location as headquarters. And certainly the specialty services will occur there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Your Worship.
Very welcome. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Sundstrom-Mann, for your wonderful presentation. Lauren, it's quite the pleasure that whenever we can connect and I can open any doors of communication and connections in our community for you to help this project move along. During your presentation, you did mention that in 2020, during our COVID, during our pandemic, you still managed to pull off an impressive 100,000 visits. And I was just wondering, with this new 106,000 square foot, 5-story building, how many visits are you projecting to be doing per year? If you may, please.
Yeah, we actually, I'd like to reserve that answer until April, because we anticipate that we are going to get some news about our operating budgets as well, which will allow me to do a much better projection.
Understood. And the second and the last question, what was I going to ask you? Okay, so you are projecting to have this completed in 2024, correct?
That's correct.
And you're waiting to have your paperwork to come in June of 2021. When are you anticipating putting shovels in the ground?
So not long after, hopefully June of 2021, when we have what in the P3 process is called financial close, that the winning team very shortly after that would be requesting site plan approval through the town of Ajax to begin construction. So we're imagining things happen very quickly so that there's a 2-year timeline leading to the opening in 2024.
Well, we wish you all the best and thank you very much for all that you do for our community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other member of council with questions? I'll just very quickly, we will be dealing with, thank you for your presentation, Lorraine. We will be dealing with the sale agreement. I don't expect there's going to be an issue with that, but were you aware that on the 11th of February, this council supported the application for the lands just to your south of where your building will be? And that was required for them to agree to convey those lands to you that you need for parking.
Yes, I thank you so much, Mayor Collier. I wanted to just acknowledge the tremendous working relationship we have with your staff. They have been exceptional to work with and have been keeping us up to date of those activities and really supporting all of the work that we need to understand through Infrastructure Ontario and our ministry. They've been exceptional to work with. Really a wonderful partnership. So thank you so much.
Well, we're doing everything we can to try and get this going. So just wanted to make sure you were aware that we were able to do that piece. Now it's up to the region next. So you may want to lobby some support there for this.
We are on it. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I don't see any other hands. So appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Moving on to items of correspondence. We have moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Dyes, the report dated February 22nd, 2021, containing items of correspondence be received for information. Any pulls? I had 3. I'm hoping someone can move to endorse for me, numbers 1, 2, and 7. Or if I do, then moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Crawford. Other than that, on the balance, those in favor? I see all hands. That's carried. On numbers, and we can probably do them together, 1, 2, and 7, to endorse. Oh, let me just go to this page. Number 1 is the Upper York sewage solution. Just again, the town of Ajax has already taken a position. We're just endorsing the region of Durham's position. Number 2, which was the census of populations. And number 7 was the city of Oshawa economic recovery and provincial occupancy restrictions. And that's requesting, again, a more science-based approach, you know, in the event that we maybe have a wave 3 or third wave, which is a distinct possibility. So, Mr. Clerk, is it okay to do all those 3 together?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you can vote on all 3 together.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments on those 3? Hearing none, those in favor of endorsing those 3 items of correspondence? I see all hands. That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to reports, we have the General Government Committee Report 7.2.1, the 2021 Operating and Capital Budget, February 8th, 2021. Moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Tyler Morin, that the General Government Committee 2021 Operating and Capital Budget Meeting Report dated February 8th be adopted. Before I go and ask if there's any amendments, Councillor Lee, I'm going to give the budget chair an opportunity if you would like to say a few words on the budget. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would. I just want our audience and our residents to know that we've spent 8 hours on this meeting and we have pulled every single line and shaved every penny we could shave off to continue to offer the services that our residents expect from us. And I feel very good about it. We've all worked hard. And when we have disagreements on council, when the councillors have disagreements, it's always for the benefit of Ajax. And I think we've done a phenomenal job, and I hope you are pleased with it. And I do want to thank our finance person, Ms. Valentim, for all the hard work she did, and her team as well. And Mr. Mayor, for you, the extra work you put into it, especially putting those numbers along with the rest of our colleagues. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me this honor to chair this budget and for the results we were able to have. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, I believe you have an amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the clerk has the wording of the amendment. If you could pull that up.
This is on
I'll actually just read it
number
going
9.
forward as he pulls it up. Correct. So it's the full wording is that recommendation number 8 of the final budget recommendations contained within the 2021 operating capital budget meeting report of February 8th, 2021 be amended to read as follows. That's 700,000 of the 2020 library operating surplus be requested to be returned to the town and be directed to the stabilization reserve. It's seconded, I believe, Regional Councillor Dyes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead if you'd like to speak to it.
Just very quickly, I had no intention of messing with like our budget chair had said, an 8-hour process, but it's come to light that part of the surplus was as a result of the wage subsidy provided by the federal government. The Cleo, our chief librarian executive officer, had informed me late last night that having done some research with other municipalities within Ontario, we're starting to see the federal government claw back a lot of the wage subsidy. So as a result of that, it will absolutely affect the library's financials to the tune of about $300,000. So that was the amendment the mayor had add to our stormwater reserve, which I absolutely supported at the time. But now that we're not getting that money, I thought it prudent that we go back to the treasurer's original recommendation, which you see before you today. And that is my comments.
Thank you. Any further questions and comments from members of council? Okay, I have a few for the treasurer, Ms. Valentim. When Councillor Lee contacted me earlier today and mentioned this, I reached out to you to get some of the information. Do you have that spreadsheet that you prepared?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Handy to share on the screen?
Okay.
When I brought forward this amendment to section 9, it's actually, Councillor Lee, it should be recommendation number 9 of the final budget, not number 8, as is in the motion. But when I brought forward the amendment to item recommendation 9, it was with full knowledge and intent that 342,000 that you see on the second line there, the Hughes repayment, whatever you want to call it, may need to be made. So you can see there the 2020 surplus at 1.448 million. And I understand through Ms. Valentin, that amount, it's not, it might need to be repaid. We are repaying it. Is that accurate?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's my understanding that we will be repaying this money.
Okay. So if you have that surplus of 1.448 and you take off the 342, which is the SUS repayment, it leaves the 1.106. The reserve fund balance is already 370,000. It has a projected balance of 200 is the what we're looking at, but it's already got almost double that. You take off the 2/3, which is part of the surplus from last year, and the $1 million transfer, you can see the balance to the reserve fund is still 227,479. So it's still 27,479 over the amount that is expected in there, and that's after the SUS replacement has been made, or the SUS amount has been repaid. Is that accurate, Madam Treasurer?
These are the estimated values that I have right now with the information that the chief librarian shared with me.
Okay. And I'll just speak to this a little bit, but I did go back to the December 20th, 2019 GGC meeting where this council created this library stabilization reserve. And reading from that report, I just need to pull it up here. Reading from that December 20th report, it identifies there was no formal policy. We created the reserve, and we created the reserve with looking for a $200,000 limit on that, just to cover such things as changes of, well, attached to that as a policy. So some of the things that reserve should be used for is, material in your decreases of soft revenues like fines, fees, that type of thing, changes in the US dollar for buying electronic items, books and that type of thing. So and 200,000 was felt to be a appropriate amount at the time. That was only a year and a bit ago. So we are still maintaining this amount, even though we're repaying that CEWS, however you want to pronounce it. So I won't be able to support the amendment, Councillor Lee, because I understand what you are trying to do, but I think that we have already covered that. And we're showing quite clearly here that 227 balance. I'm not going to worry about the gap estimate because that's next year's budget, and we'll definitely deal with that next year on that 3-year repayment plan that we're doing. But that balance reserve balance is still exceeds what we were trying to do. Meanwhile, the stormwater management reserve is at or near zero. And that is an area that we really need some work on. It doesn't make sense to me to have $500,000 sitting in a reserve in the library budget that's supposed to have $200,000 when we have no money to do the much needed stormwater maintenance going forward, which was the intent. The other thing I just want to point out before I finish is if you go to the library administration policy and you read about any surplus, it basically says very clearly that the library reserve will be funded by contributions from the operating budget surplus. The target of the library reserve will be $200,000. Any additional surplus from the library's operating budget is to be recorded as surplus, and the rest returned to the town or will reduce the grant in the next year. So technically, that entire 1.448 million is supposed to form a reduction to the library grant in 2021. That's the way the policy reads. And if we follow it by the book, that's what we should do. That's not what we're doing. What we've come to is a bit of a compromise, recognizing that we do have to make this repayment, or the library will have to make this repayment, while at the same time keeping that reserve at its full, actually over what it needs to be. So I think that's a good compromise, and I'm going to stick with my decision on February 11th. Councillor, you spoke. I'm just going to go to some of the others first. I see Councillor.
Sure, yeah, sorry about that, please.
And then Bauer, and I'll come back to you. Councillor Dias as a seconder.
Thank you. I just wondered if the CAO of the library was able to be here tonight to address some of the concerns I have.
Through
I
the
don't
chair
know.
online.
Okay, and there's a lot of back and forth, and I know these are uncertain times for both the municipality and the library, and I take, obviously you'd feel more comfortable having that leeway and having that money just in case something happens. I wonder if you could speak to that and how your budget had been worked out, basically what your concerns are.
Through the mayor to Regional Councillor Dies, I'll preface this statement by saying that these are unaudited financial statements, and it would be our preference, of course, if we had time to have our audited financial statements before we considered the transfer. But time being of the essence, we are using the figures that we have in front of us. The library reserve policy, as the mayor has gone through, is designed as a stabilization fund to be used in the event of an emergency. Again, that is for in-year fluctuations of provincial grants, fluctuations in foreign currency, because that impacts our ability to purchase materials, and unanticipated costs as a result of legal expenditures or employee-related things that come up that were unforeseen. And it is for those reasons that I am asking council to reconsider this, because if you look at the bottom of option 1, the estimated balance of the library stabilization reserve in 2022 would be $103,000, which is of course under the target of $200,000. 2020 has shown us many things. The first is that the future is unknown and there are unforeseen costs that come up. And it is for those reasons that I would ask for this consideration. When the $1 million was being put forward, that did consider the $342,000 in revenue from the SUs. And at that time, based on conversations library staff had with Canada Revenue agents, we were under the impression that our eligibility would remain. After doing some research and investigating with my counterparts, that is not the case. And in fact, this transfer of any money back to the town ensures that the library will be ineligible for this funding because it links us to the municipality and we fall under a public institution.
I appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bauer, I think I saw you next.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is, what is the risk to the library if the reserve is reduced?
Through the mayor, I actually have the library board chair with us this evening, and I'd like to defer that question to him if I may.
Thank you.
It's Matthew Tapscott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Oh, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I think the risk for us is certainly, you can see when you look at the spreadsheet, is the $103,000. What you're drawing on is you're drawing down on cash reserves and eligibility, which leaves us with very, very, very little money in terms of fluctuations. It basically gives us 2% working capital variances, because our budget's $6 million. You're leaving us with $100,000 to play with. That's very, as I'm sure you guys can appreciate, that's a very narrow margin to be working with. We want to work with you as the town. We certainly want that to be the case, but we can't jeopardize our essentially our solvency almost to a point by giving away the $1 million. That's kind of the perspective on that. It's significantly taking us down to a very little working capital net, if you will. Hopefully that answers your question, Councilor Bauer.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tapscott. I have no other questions, Chair.
Any other, Councillor Crawford? Oh, I see Tyler Murness.
Oh, I think Councillor Tyler was before me, to be
I
honest.
think
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Councillor Tyler.
Okay, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. And Mr. Tapscott, thank you for, one of the questions I was going to ask is what is the operating budget? So just so I'm clear, and thank you for all the great work you do on the library board. It's a very important part of our town. So there's a $6 million operating budget that we have for the library. And as we speak, I think I'm talking very layman here, we have about a $200,000 reserve. And this motion is to ask for a $500,000 reserve, a $500,000 reserve. Is that all correct? So that's basically right now you have a $6 million operating budget with a $200,000 reserve, but you want a $6 million budget and a $500,000 reserve. Is that correct? Or is that just a little too simple? Thank you. I don't know who wants to answer that, Mr. Tapscott or our Director of Library Services.
Got her hand up. Go ahead.
Through the mayor to Councillor Tyler Morin, looking at option 2 again, you'll note that the estimated balance of the library's stabilization reserve in 2022 would then be brought down to $400,000. I think it's important that if we're looking, the intention initially when we were transferring the $1 million, and perhaps the mayor and I are looking through different lens when we're looking through that $1 million transfer, it was based on our 2020 surplus being higher. And so we were suggesting that the transfer go through in consideration of that larger amount. Since that amount has become smaller, we are suggesting that this be reconsidered. And so we were not looking to change the library's reserve as a result of this transfer.
Okay,
Further?
thank you.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would wonder if I could make an amendment to the amendment. Is that possible? And
It's
I'm
possible.
just wondering if there's an appetite to split it down the middle. So the additional $300,000, could we make it a library contribution of $850,000 and then take the additional $150 and put it into the stormwater reserve? Is there an appetite? Oh, that's my amendment.
Let's see if you have a seconder. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
To the amendment?
I'll second it,
By
Chair.
Councillor Bauer that the 700 be made 850 and the other 150 still go to the stormwater. So it's the original motion, but reducing the 300,000 to the stormwater reserve to 150.
Yes, yes.
Okay, on the amendment to the amendment. I know Councillor Lee, you wanted to speak on the amendment. Do you now want to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Chair. You can actually ignore me after this. That actually makes a lot of sense because if you look at the first number, so we add 150 to that number, puts it about 253, which is in line with where the Clio wants it. I would be supportive of that. I think that is a good compromise that still ensures that we're starting. I mean, obviously my preference is still the 700,000. I think that, but understanding this, yeah, you know what, sorry, I'm talking out loud and I should have formulated my thoughts, but no, I think I could support that amendment to my amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else have questions on the amendment to the amendment? Okay, I have some questions on the amendment to the amendment. So either Ms. Vaisler or Mr. Tapscott, either one of you can answer, whoever wants it. Looking at the chart on option 1 or option 2, the second last line from the bottom where it says 2022 budget gap estimate. Can we agree that's next year, 2022, and that is not part of the discussion here today? because I see it's muddying the waters and it's not relevant in our discussion today. That's budget. You're asking us to predetermine budget in 2022, which I'm not willing to do today. So can we agree that the estimated balance for option 1 is 227,479 and the estimated balance for option 2 is 527,479, and we're not going to talk about next year's budget allocation? Is that fair?
With respect to your worship, no, I cannot agree to that, because the library must plan a stable funding model. We must put forward a plan for a stable funding model. This was a plan that the treasurer and I and the library board have worked on. And so no, I cannot agree on that.
So let me change the question. We're in 2021. We're doing our budget for 2021. If we go ahead with option 1, the balance in the reserve will be 227,479 after the SUS is repaid.
That is after 2021. Yes, that does not consider the approximately $125,000 needed to offset the municipal grant in 2020.
That's not the question I asked. The question I asked is, after the SUS is repaid, based on what we have here, our balance in the library reserve would be 227,479 on February the 22nd, 2021.
Yes.
Thank you. And alternately, if we do option 2, it would be 677,479 if the amendment to the amendment goes through.
If the amendment to the amendment goes through, it would be 377,000 at the end of 2021.
No, 677, I believe. Let me just see. The treasurer is changing the numbers right now.
So the amendment would be $377,000.
That doesn't make sense. It's 150,000 difference. It should be 427, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, the amount of the transfer was changed from 750 to 850.
Okay. There we go. So I'm asking that question so council and those watching aren't confused with the 2022 numbers that are being put in there. They're not relevant to our discussion today. I absolutely understand the need to plan the budget out, and I absolutely understand the 3-year repayment balancing thing that we're putting in place for the surplus transfer last year, but that's a discussion for February next year. Today, we're dealing with the numbers 227 and 377. Now, I assume you both have copies of the, let me just pull it up here. I assume you both have copies of the Ajax Public Library Administration Policy.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. And this policy has been approved by the board?
Yes, sorry, could you repeat the policy that you're referring to? I missed that.
Maybe Ms. Valentin, do you have it? The policy, Ajax Public Library Admin Policy, AP-FIN 008, approved on December 19th, 2020?
Yes, the library reserve policy.
Okay. So looking at that, item 1.2, the library reserve is to be used for things like soft revenue losses like fines, photocopier, bank interest, room bookings, in-year reduction of provincial grants revenues, material fluctuation in foreign currency for purchasing ebooks in US dollars, unanticipated change to digital rights management, unanticipated costs resulting for expenditures such as legal, and unbudgeted funds to leverage opportunities to apply for grant funding. That reserve was set at a balance of 200,000. Ms. Valentin, that's not a minimum, is it? That's a max balance projected?
It's a target balance.
That's a target balance. So
Yes.
it's not a minimum. That's the target balance. I imagine when that was brought forward, I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was felt by you, well, not you as treasurer, the previous treasurer, that 200,000 was sufficient buffer for the library for those types of things I just spoke about.
To answer your question, I believe when I read the report, it spoke to the fact that it would be reviewed annually, but I think at the time when this was, when the report was written and the policy was brought forward, 200,000 was the target at that time.
Okay, well, let me simplify it. The policy hasn't changed, so the target is 200,000 today.
Correct.
Okay, and any accumulated surplus will be applied as a deduction from the following year's operating grant from the town to the library. That's pretty clear. So my questions to Ms. Vaisler and Mr. Tapscott, would you prefer me to do an amendment to the amendment to the amendment that the 2021 library grant be reduced by 1.448 million? Or would we rather just leave it as it is? Because the policy says we should be reducing your grant this year by 1.448 million. I recognize that that was probably too much because you probably would have had to repay the SUs, which is why I did it this way. But the other way is that it get reduced. So knowing the policy that you both agreed to and the board has approved, which would you rather do?
Your worship, the library board would not want for the surplus to be reduced by over $1 million. The intention of the policy was never to consider a surplus of this size. And I thank you, my gratitude to you for recognizing that and not putting the library board in this position by reducing that surplus. So on behalf of the board, thank you for that, because I think that that is an important distinction to understand that 2020 is a remarkable year.
Mm-hmm.
Further, in response to your questions about the size of the library's reserve, it is very typical for libraries to hold reserve accounts and capital accounts. In looking at our lakeshore municipalities, Clarington, Oshawa, and Whitby, as well as Pickering, all hold capital and or reserve accounts. For example, Whitby's operating budget is roughly 5.3 million and they hold a reserve of $500,000. This reserve.
That's not my question. And that's not the question I asked. What the others have is not relevant here. Our policy is 200,000 and I'd like to deal with our policy. If we change that policy later, no problem. And we can have that discussion. But based on this budget this year, we have to use the policies that are approved by the town and the board for this budget. So based on that, in reality, according to the policy, the entire amount should be reduced off the grant this year. Ms. Valentin, you have your hand
Sorry,
up?
just for clarification, item 2.3 says the accumulated surplus will be applied as a deduction from the following year's operating grant.
Oh, so it should come off the 2022.
Correct.
That doesn't make sense. If it's a 2020 surplus, why would it come off the 2022?
It's timing because we bring the budget forward before the financial statements are completed. So the timing doesn't work if we deduct it from the current year 2021 budget. So, and that's why, because of the pandemic and the size of the surplus this year, that's why we opted to make it a little bit different and suggest that some of it come back.
Okay, and that's why I thought what I brought forward at the budget meeting was a fair compromise. It was still increasing the reserve over what it was supposed to be, and it took into account the possible repayment of the SUs. I won't ask any more questions. I'll just speak to it quickly. I can't support the amendment to the amendment. I think we've done our jobs here. We've looked very closely at every bit of the budget, operating, capital, and library in every respect, and we made some hard decisions. And ultimately, there is only one taxpayer. And we need to be following these policies and procedures that we've set out. We've made a slight change here to allow for the CEWS repayment. I know that Ajax was the only municipality in the region to apply for it. I think that's unfortunate in hindsight, but it's done. What's done is done. We'll pay it back. I understand, and speaking with the treasurer today, it is being paid back right away. And I think we're leaving the balance, the reserve balance, in a very healthy position over. At the same time, I think all but our vehicle replacement reserve and all of our other capitals are well under their target balances. So it's a good compromise. It keeps everybody whole, and it also helps with one of our major problems that we have, which is the stormwater management reserve, or the stormwater reserve, that we don't have a funding source for. And next year we may be having to sit down and talk about having a 1% increase dedicated to stormwater management because we don't have a funding source for it. We've talked about it before and decided not to go ahead, but I don't really see another way to do it. We may also have to look at a 1% for capital going forward, because again, we've lost our slots revenues and we may need to supplement our capital. So this is the right thing to do. It doesn't make sense having a big surplus sitting in the library reserve for what? It's not going to get spent, and this year is going to be very similar to last year. It might not be a $1.528 million surplus, as this was before that amount was taken off, but it's definitely probably going to be about $1 million surplus with the libraries closed a lot of the year, or curbside pickup, or whatever is happening. And we'll deal with the 2022 stuff next year. I'll leave it there. Councillor Crawford, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Valentine, is the library required to pay the $124,000 out of this budget? It's very tiny, so I'm like got my nose right up to the screen trying to read the whole chart, but it seems to me that there's 3 payments that have to happen. I'm assuming it's 2020. The gap is 20 from 2020, and the payment is 2021, 22, 23. Am I correct or am I not correct? Because if it's not necessary, I don't understand why it's in the chart period. If it is necessary, then I believe that the $150 split addresses the issue and maintains the correct balance in the reserve of 200 and a little bit more. So I'm confused as to whether or not they actually owe the money in 2021, and if they don't, then why is it there? Because it seems to be confusing. Well, maybe I'm the only one confused by it, but I'm confused.
Okay, through the mayor to Original Councillor Crawford. So through my budget presentation and the workings of the library grant, in 2020, the amount of the library grant was reduced by a surplus from the prior year of $373,000. So what we tried to do is provide that in a stepped, phase it over 3 years, bring that back in over 3 years. So what is happening, this year for 2021, we included the library increase of the grant was $189,000 increase, and $124,333 was the town portion of that. So 1/3 of that 373. So the library was required to still fund the 2/3 of that. So next year, that's what that 124 is. They would be required to fund another 125 and then a further. So we were just trying to show that that was what was part of the recommendation and moving forward. But That is, so if council does not wish to hold those, to have the library hold those funds, it would just come forward next year that there would be a larger gap that the municipality has to fill.
So,
There
so
won't
when
be-
you're talking gap, you're talking about the reduced amount of money going to the library.
Right.
Is that correct? So,
Yes.
so in this sense, they're not actually paying us back. We're just reducing that amount from their budget.
Right.
Okay. So, and
So
that,
if they don't have that in their reserve, if we do not provide them with that in the reserve, then they can't fill that part. So they would come to the municipality through the budget process and ask for the full amount to get them where they need to be.
right. So, so the 150 fills the gap that we're talking about, correct? A little bit more, but it basically fills the gap that we're talking about. Is that correct?
For 2022.
For 2022, right?
For the 373 that was put in last year.
Right.
So I tried to do it over a few years.
Right. So then the next budget that we look at, it will be again reduced by 124, correct? Because
If the
it's a
right,
phased approach over the next 3 years.
So that's what I had proposed in this budget. But if council decides not to allow the library to keep sufficient funds, they won't have it in their reserves to fill that part of the gap. Then it would just come back to the municipality to provide them with the full amount of their grant request.
Okay. I don't know if that explained it to, if anybody else was confused, but that does help me to understand what it is. It's more of a budget reduction to the board that has to be accounted in their budget because they're not getting that money. It's not necessarily that they're paying it back.
They're filling that gap. So their budget is a certain amount. And as per the policy, if they have a surplus, then it gets the municipal ask or the municipal grant is reduced by the amount of the surplus.
Right.
So because we didn't want to have a $373,000 hit this year because of the pandemic,
right,
we decided to allow them to keep some of that in the reserve to kind of fill it over time.
Okay. Okay, I understand. So the 150 does kind of, it is their solution for at least this payment, filling the gap.
For 2022.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
Further questions? Just to, I think that was, for me anyway, more confusing. Ms. Valentin, I just want to try and approach it from a bit different angle, because again, we're talking about 2022 funding now, and I'm trying to keep us on 2021 really hard, but we keep going back to 2022. We have devised a plan to repay that 373 over 3 years, that 124 we're talking about. That 124,000 is going to be made next year. I'm sure it's going to be in the budget because that's the plan. There's no need to pad the reserve this year to cover that reserve payment or that top up for next year. That doesn't make any sense. But can you tell me, just Ms. Valentin, if we stick with option 1, is the library in any danger? Is the library going to be in any trouble financially, and they're going to suffer any hardship if we stick with option 1? Yes or no?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, it's not for me to say. I don't do their finances. I only provide them with the municipal grant. So that would be up to Ms. Faisler.
Yeah, no, we're not going there.
But I think that's wrong though, isn't it? The municipal grant that we give to the library board is going to be reduced by $124,000 this year, is it not?
No,
in the 2021 budget.
We topped it up with the 189, right? I tried to remove the 50,000 for the waiving of the fees. That didn't get done. So in effect, we actually added an extra $50 or $50,000. But the way the policy reads, if there's any shortfall, which there won't be, if there's any shortfall, it gets taken from the reserve first. And if there's not sufficient funds in reserve, then they come back to the town. There's 227,000 left in the reserve. They're arguing over 124,000. There's more than enough that there. Is that correct, Ms. Valentin?
Based on the information, yes, if we took $1 million, they would have an estimating a reserve balance of $227,000 for the end
Right.
of 2021.
So that is all covered. I don't want this to be confusing at all. I want everybody to understand, because we just keep moving numbers around, and talking about 2022 allocations in 2021 is not helpful.
Well, I kind of think that they're, oh, sorry, I'm talking of turn. I'll be quiet.
Well, we can add you to the list again. I just wanted to make that clarification before the vote, because I don't want anybody to be under any misconception here. We did the right vote at budget, but is there anything further on the amendment to the amendment? So on the amendment to the amendment, that is to basically transfer, oh, there we go, 850 to the town instead of the million, and 150, so, okay, there it is at the bottom. That the recommendation, are you sure it's not number 9, Mr. Clerk, of the final budget recommendation?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. It was number 9 in the staff report with recommendations, but became number 8 in the GGC budget report as a result of the ASC recommendation being removed.
Very good, thank you. So recommendation number 8 of the final budget recommendations be amended that 850 of the 2020 library operating surplus be requested to be returned to the town, 700,000 which shall be directed to the stabilization reserve, and 150,000 which shall be directed to the stormwater maintenance reserve. If there's nothing further on the amendment to the amendment, those in favor? I see 3 hands. Those opposed? I see 4 hands. That fails. On Councillor Lee, your amendment that the amount be reduced to 700,000 and that the 300, which is option 2 on the thing. Is there any further conversation needed? Okay, on the amendment, those in favor? I see 4 hands. Well, that carries. Opposed? 3. That's interesting. Okay, that carries. On the budget as amended, do we need any further conversation on the budget as amended? Okay, being none, those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any opposed? That's carried. Moving on. To General Government Committee report from February 16th, 2021, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Khan, that the GGC report dated February 16th be adopted. Any questions or comments on the report? Hearing, seeing none, those in favor? That's carried. On the summary of advisory committee activities, moved by Councillor Dye, second by Councillor Bauer, that the summary of advisory committee activities report dated February 22nd, 2021, as attached to the meeting agenda be received for information, and that the recommendations contained therein be referred to staff where applicable. Questions or comments? Hearing, seeing none, those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to departmental reports. This is the amendment to the North Harwood property agreement of purchase and sale of Grandview Children's Center. Moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Khan. The council approve a bylaw to execute an amending agreement of purchase and sale with Grandview Children's Center for the sale of the North Harwood property. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Those in favor? That's carried. Departmental reports. This is on item 7.4.2, Envision Durham Municipal Comprehensive Review, Town of Ajax position on request for employment area conversions as amended. We have a motion to suspend the rules of procedure, which requires 2/3, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Tyler Morin, that the rules of procedure be suspended in order to allow unscheduled delegations and presentations regarding departmental report 7.4.2. Those in favor of allowing delegations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That carries. And we will go to delegations now. Mr. Clerk, how many delegations do we have?
Mr. Mayor, we have 2 delegates tonight. The first delegate to register is Mr. David Kemper of Belmont Equity.
Okay, before we move on to that, I think we'll have a 5-minute break. We're an hour and a half in. So let's break for 5 minutes. We'll come back here at 8:35 with Mr. Kemper.
Mr. Mayor, we are live again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kemper, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, please go ahead. You'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just going to share my screen.
Members of council, I have to move all these aside so I can see the screen, so I won't see your hands, but I'll come to you after.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Mayor Collier and council, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you this evening about our conversion request. We are the proud owners of a 9.5 acre parcel of land at the corner of Rosslyn and Harwood. As you can see from the pictures, we have developed a plaza with Longo's grocery store anchor and other tenants that we are quite proud of. We took many years in purchasing the property in 2015 as vacant land to develop the property as it is today, which was essentially finished in 2018 with the tenants that you see today. We spent a lot of time working with the city and the region to achieve what we are, again, like I said, very proud of, and took many pains to try and create a very nice architecturally responsible plaza utilizing first-class materials such as natural stone, brick, and metal panels integrated with really nice landscaping. And we took this effort and to try and create a plaza that we wanted to hold for the long term. And that's and that's our plan from day one, was to own and operate this plaza for the long term. Now we believe there's another opportunity to add a component to it to make it that much better and more successful. Just going to switch on the laser pointer here. So just to give you a quick background in terms of the aerial photograph, our property is outlined in red. The green outline reflects the undeveloped portion of the property. Immediately beside us is the Shell gas station, Tim Hortons. Right over here is a 14-story building, residential building, which is under construction right now. Directly across from us is the Pickering Christian School, which owns all these lands, and they're developing more sports fields in the back. This parcel of land here is the region. It's a pumping station owned by the region. This land over here is CNR number 19, which was another conversion request. And last week, council made a motion to support this portion to be converted and, for residential and the other mixed uses. And here is the high schools, which you'll be familiar with. And then in addition to these 3 schools, there's 4 other schools. Another one down here, 2, 3, 4. All of those schools are within walkable distance from our site. The purpose of the presentation is to focus and clarify our request with respect to our conversion. The conversion request, we're asking for a conversion only with respect to the 1.4 acre undeveloped portion of the site. The other 8.2 acres should be maintained with the existing uses in a long-term manner. Council members were correct. Existing uses should remain for the long term. The original request was framed as being for the entire lands. Council members were correct that existing uses like DeLongo's grocery store are successful. Council wants these uses to be maintained for the long term. Thus, we're asking council to consider conversion only of the undeveloped portion, the 1.4 acres. We are committing to maintain prestige employment and retail uses at the grade level of the proposed residential building on the undeveloped portion, the 1.4 acres. Thus, even with a conversion, the site will produce employment generating uses at grade similar to what would have happened if conversion was not approved. This is the Starbucks building on the left. This is an example of having at grade retail / employment in the base of a residential building. Current approval, the current approval that we have is for a 1-story retail and prestige employment building on the undeveloped parcel. We are committing to having those uses at grade level in a proposed new building. Approval of the conversion can make this a condition. The result will be residential uses introduced above while achieving job growth from the site on the ground floor. Employment generating uses as originally approved would still be delivered even after the conversion. As such, the vision for employment on the lands that the municipality has already approved and which council has expressed an intent to maintain would still be achieved. Why is this good for the community? Creating a walkable community is what we believe can come from this. Providing an opportunity for live, work, play, and walking to school, all from this location. Creating a better diversity of housing options, 1 and 2 bedroom units, which are more attainable financially, especially for first-time home buyers. Also to allow people to stay within their community. People who no longer want to shovel the driveway or maintain a larger property can now would be able to stay within their property, within their community. And on top of that, a project like this would support the existing businesses at this node with more customers within walking distance. All of this can be achieved without giving up additional employment and retail uses at grade. So I'm asking council for their support, for your support of our conversion request as modified. And if council's not yet comfortable with then perhaps a deferral would be an opportunity for more discussion. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of council have any questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the proponent in question, how many units were you hoping to put on this land?
The drawing that you see there has 159 units proposed in it, but that drawing is just a very early conceptual drawing. No application has been made at this stage.
But in theory, would there be underground parking?
Yes, right now we've drawn 2 levels of underground parking. And
with all the traffic, because you're already cutting into, a few of the traffic spots in front of Freshie, a few of the traffic spots in front of the Starbucks side, you think all 2 levels of parking is enough to sustain 159 residents and all the people shopping, the consumers shopping in that plaza?
Yes, the parking that is there currently, you can actually see within that photograph, is not well used. And the reason for that is because we built that parking ahead of time. It was pre-built. And on top of that, we actually pre-built more parking than actually what the municipality required. So it's the combination of that together. By putting all the parking underneath and underground for the residents and leaving visitor parking at grade, it separates out those 2 activities for the building. And it does, our experience in other municipalities is that works well, and the parking ratio that's based on is consistent with other municipalities too.
Just an observation, or just right now, those spots are being used because they are snowbanks, if I'm not mistaken. I was just there today, and with your new proposal, I'm not sure where snow would go, like on a busy plaza where, and
yes, sorry not to cut you off, but what we do
please.
with snow, what we do with snow is we actually truck it away. So when we have excess property like this, then they just pile it on the excess land because it keeps the operating costs down for the tenants. But what we do quite normally with plazas like this is we would actually truck the snow away.
Fair enough. No further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions to Mr. Kemper? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, sir. I'm just concerned about the traffic off of Roslyn and Harwood, because as it is right now, it's pretty cumbersome getting in and out of that area. What plans do you have to address that part?
Thank you for your question. It's important for all of us to ensure that the center works well for our customers and for the tenants. We can all agree on that. The planning and approval process will provide a forum for for that review. In terms of, because we have not actually made an application for this at this stage. The property, I will just say that the property does enjoy a traffic light on Rosslyn, and then we also have an all turns access on Harwood, both of which have excess capacity. But at the end of the day, through the full approval process, which includes rezoning and site plan, there's the opportunity for the city, for neighbors, for everybody to participate in that, including the experts and the engineers, to ensure that we come up with a workable solution.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you, Your Worship.
Anything further from members of council? I just have a couple. I didn't actually hear an answer to Councillor Lee's question about how many stories were you contemplating?
14 stories, which is the same as the building that's being constructed on the other side of Harwood.
Yeah, I'm aware. When you made your application to the region for conversion, did you specify the entire property? Have you amended that application at the region to just be this portion?
Not as of yet, and we're happy to do so. We have been focused on the process over the last couple of weeks here with the city.
And did you submit a concept plan with your application?
Yes, we did. And that was also provided to, I believe your staff has that as well.
Okay, so what guarantee do we have, if this were to be allowed, that what we see today is what we'll get?
Well, I think the important piece, which can be achieved through a condition, would be that there be no residential uses on the ground floor, and that it would be prestige employment and retail uses similar to how the site is zoned today, to ensure that the jobs are achieved, and that the residential above becomes the bonus to the city and to the community. And so, I would be happy to have the plans that we have right now, so to speak, enshrined, because we believe that it's a very good plan. But that said, as we pointed out earlier, we haven't made a full application yet, and there are traffic studies that need to be done. There are, all the various types of reports that need to go along with that. And through that process of working with city staff, there may be some necessary changes that staff wishes to make that then we would incorporate, which is the normal process.
So this is 0.6 of a hectare. What would the job density be from maintaining third floor or first floor employment?
Well, we have 37 jobs per hectare, and 0.6 would be 22 jobs.
Okay. I did a lot of pre-consults with a lot of the applicants on these over a year and a half ago. And one of the things that we made very clear is we need to increase the density, and 37 isn't the number we're using. 50 jobs per hectare is the number we've been using. I would want to see increased density. I would probably want to see a second floor of office space. What would the proponent have to say about that?
Yeah, the second floor office space. I mean, we do have some second floor office space, or sorry, not office space. We have second floor space in the two buildings that we have there, and that's because we were fortunate. One is women's fitness, so it's a fitness studio, and the other one is the elephant room, which is the daycare. And in the back of the daycare, there's some medical space. All of those types of uses have exclusive, rights, so we can't add any additional uses to that. We've found in the past that second floor space is very tricky, and the reason those buildings got built was because we had those tenants ahead of time, and we were able to create the space in a way that worked for their businesses. Like for the daycare, for example, we had to build the outside play area, and so it's I mean, having space that ends up being vacant is not ideal for anybody. So that's that's a concern. I think it's something that we'd certainly be happy to look at and to talk about. But usually that type of space is, comes along with a tenant that is in the market at a particular point in time. But like I said, we'd be willing and happy to take a look at that, consider that.
Well, to me, that would be a condition. Because again, I want to see increased density. 37 just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if then if there was a portion of the second floor that was office or some other employment use, then okay. So then it goes along with like to make these projects, and I'll be totally frank, to make these projects viable, in order to add some second floor space, which would have to be leased at a discount in order to make sure that it gets leased, then we need to make sure that we fully achieve all the residential floors. So the scenario, which would be really unfortunate, would be a scenario where, later in the process, the height of the building gets cut down, the residential area of the building gets cut down for some reason, and then all of a sudden the project's not feasible. One of the reasons we haven't been able to build any residential there or any retail there at this point is because there hasn't been a strong amount of tenant interest, and the finances around how pre-building space, it's very difficult. Banks won't lend on it, right? So it becomes difficult that way. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's a balance. We're happy to try and achieve additional second floor space. I would just hope that later on in the process that we wouldn't be the full residential floor plate would still be available to us in order to, essentially subsidize, because that's what's kind of happening on the second floor spaces. There's almost like a subsidy happening.
So you've probably had a chance to review some of the other decisions that this council has made on some of the applications. And so you've seen the type of conditions that we've put in there.
Yes.
Signing a development agreement, specific zoning in the regional zoning bylaws to make sure that the employment is built and occupied before the residential starts, that type of thing. Any issue with your applicant entering into those same type of agreements?
Yes, just in the sense that this is a one building site. So therefore it would all be built at the same time. The residential and the commercial components would all be built in one single building. It's not possible to build underground parking and then stop at, say, the second floor and then lease it, occupy, and then come back and then start construction again on the above. So in a building or in a site where you have a large site, you can do that through differently. But in a site like this, we only have it would just be a single building. So it's not possible to stop construction halfway through.
Okay. My main thing is to make sure that what we see is what we get, that we don't get a strictly residential building.
Agreed. And I can tell you this with my entire heart that what we built there was a labor of love for us. We built it that way and as beautifully as we did because we enjoy and have a pride of development, and not all developers have that. And so we labor over these things because we want to create wonderful buildings and wonderful places for people. And so you have my personal commitment to ensuring that we do that. And on top of that, because we own the mall, we obviously want it to be workable and work well together. And what is built there, we want it to be beautiful and complement the mall for the long term, because we're going to continue to own, the entire thing too, right? So there is a kind of a natural vested interest for us there too.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I actually really love the concept of this. One-stop shop, residential there, grocery store, everything you would ever need is in that mall. You would never have to leave anywhere to go any place. Starbucks, Booster Juice, everything is there. Fried chicken, it's wonderful. I cannot wrap my head around the traffic though. Our infrastructure on Roslyn Road is so horrible at this point. I know you talked about the luxury of a light at Roslyn, and while that is a luxury, I believe it was something that you needed from the region to do in order to do the mall itself. and it actually messes up all the lights on the other end. So I don't know, until that road gets widened to 4 lanes, I just can't even envision adding more cars. And I know the theory is that people won't need cars. I don't know that that actually works in Ajax. I think that people move here and bring 6 cars, actually. I'm not really sure that they even just have 1. So although I really love the concept, I really, really love the concept, the location of a condominium would be perfect because it's not around any other residential. I still can't wrap my head around the traffic. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. When you were talking a few minutes ago about the second floor retail, and you said something about a subsidy for it. I don't remember exactly the phrasing, but were you saying that there might be a need to add an additional floor? So instead of 14, you would think 15? Or
That would be nice. No, what I was referring to is to ensuring that we don't achieve less than 14. And the subsidy comes out of the, from the residential side of the pro forma, where the revenues that are generated on the residential side effectively go to help create the space that you would then lease at a lower rate than it would be economically feasible by itself.
Thank you. And in your original conversion application, the request, you had mentioned residential, retirement home, and long-term care, as well as a mixed use. Is this building, would you have any other component other than residential? So the retirement, would there be retirement or long-term options available?
Initially, we had requested to have the full flexibility. We're comfortable with a pure residential focus in terms of condominiums or apartments, because also seniors apartments would be a portion of that. The difference for seniors living would just be a care component, which others are providing in the area. And so we're comfortable to move forward with the project without those. We were simply asking for that for flexibility.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kemper. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kemper, for the delegation.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, who do we have next?
Mr. Mayor, we have Scott Waterhouse from GHD Limited.
Mr. Waterhouse, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am.
Okay, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned, my name is Scott Waterhouse, Planning Manager with GHD in Whitby. I am addressing council this evening on behalf of Chieftain Development Corporation regarding the land south of Bailey Street East and east of Shoal Point Road. Now, Mr. Mayor, I may maybe share my screen if I may. Bear with me here. I'm just navigating here, or if the town clerk could put my mapping up. Yep, there it is. That's perfect. Can everyone see that mapping?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. An employment conversion request was submitted to Durham Region in 2020, and this submission is summarized in the staff report before you this evening, referenced as request CNR-09. The Chieftain employment parcel is indicated on the screen in a purple shading and located specifically between Shoal Point Road to the west and Clayton Road to the east. Now, I won't go into much detail on this original submission, other than to note that, as council is aware, conversion request was also submitted for the adjacent Daced employment parcel immediately to the east, referenced as request CNR-34 in the staff report. Further correspondence was submitted to the town on February 9th, requesting to focus the conversion to a living area designation to the Chieftain parcel west of Clayton Road, as we believe this parcel was the stronger of the 2 requests for conversion when considering its context and adjacent land uses. We then followed the council workshop discussion on February 11th, and we understand that council would like to keep these lands designated for employment uses. However, we also acknowledge the discussion at that workshop regarding a grocery store and how underserved this community is by a grocery store component. For some additional context regarding the Southeast Ajax community, the nearest grocery store to the east is over 4 kilometers away, and the nearest grocery store to the west is over 2.5 kilometers away in the downtown area of Ajax. Now, it was noted at that workshop that the recommendation by town planning staff includes a gross floor area cap of 500 square meters for any individual retail store, including a grocery store. We understand this was recommended to provide additional retail opportunity, but still maintain the spirit of the employment designation. While we understand and appreciate the recommendations of town planning staff, we feel that this floor area cap would only limit the future potential for a grocery store to properly serve the existing and growing Southeast Ajax community. It is our submission this Southeast Ajax community can support a grocery store greater than 500 square meters. And in fact, such a floor area restriction would only underserve the retail needs of this community and these lands. We believe the South Ajax community and the Chieftain employment parcel could easily support a larger grocery store with a floor area of between 1,500 to 2,000 square meters, which would be approaching the size of, say, a typical Sobeys grocery store. Now, the neighborhood plan image you see on the screen kind of provides a bit of context on the wider and growing Southeast Ajax community, and also notes the designated employment lands along Bailey Street. In addition to the existing Southeast Ajax population, there will be in the next few years an additional approximately 1,000 dwelling units when considering the remaining John Body Home subdivision development just west of Audley Road, along with the future residential development of the magnum opus lands south of Lenny Street, along with the future residential development for the Finch Rose, Chieftain, and Dace lands between Lenny Street and the Bailey Street employment lands. It is our submission that this additional residential population only provides further support for a more substantial grocery store with a floor area greater than 500 square meters. Mr. Mayor, finally, we feel that the inclusion of a retail use with a larger grocery store would be the best land use at the intersection of Clayton Road and Bailey Street. We've indicated the intersection of Clayton Road and Bailey Street with a red circle there. It's identifying it as a primary gateway access point from Bailey Street into the South Ajax residential community. This intersection will be signalized in the future and will function as the primary road to access the future elementary school and future community park to the south on the magnum opus lands when traveling from Bailey Street. When considering the future Clayton Road and Bailey Street intersection as a gateway and primary entrance into the larger residential area, we feel that this residential community would be better served with a living area designation west of Clayton Road to facilitate a commercial use in a larger grocery store at this location. Mr. Mayor, in closing, we kindly request that council supports a living area designation to permit expanded retail floor area opportunity for the Chieftain parcel to attract a grocery store of sufficient scale to serve the Southeast Ajax community. Mr. Mayor, this concludes my delegation this evening.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Waterhouse, from members of council? I just have one quickly. I'd like to circle back to your comments about a full-size grocery store. I know the staff recommendation is that the request not be converted and that area-specific policy 6.18 be added. And I understand that policy limits the size to 500 square meters. So are you suggesting that that area-specific policy not be applied to this land, so that limit is not there? I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. Our submission would be that rather than relying on that specific policy, which, as previously discussed, would have that cap, that floor area cap, we would be alternatively seeking a living area designation, which wouldn't necessarily have that ceiling, that floor area ceiling, as the alternative land use to allow the, in our view, a more substantial grocery store at that location.
Can you just explain that to me? And I'll ask my staff this later when we get to the report. The living area zoning, what else does that allow?
Mr. Mayor, speaking at the Durham Region official plan level, the living area designation would allow, in addition to sort of full range of commercial uses, would also allow residential uses. It's a fairly broad designation at the regional level. But the only thing I would add is that it would be further detailed and delineated when the time comes for the town of Ajax to then update their official plan to align with the Durham Region official plan if it is updated and if the lands are converted from employment to living area.
Okay, your proposed use for this conversion request is proposed for 85 townhouse dwelling units and a stormwater pond.
Mr. Mayor, yes, our original submission to Durham Region last year included a concept for that chieftain piece for some townhouse development, and at the time contemplated a commercial uses on the other side of Clayton Road on the Daced piece. After giving further consideration to this area, we are now requesting that the living area designation only apply to the chieftain parcel, and that to specifically allow for the grocery store, more substantial grocery floor store component.
So you're no longer interested in building any townhouses on that site?
To the question, Mr. Mayor, the focus is for the grocery store. I would add that if town council felt, in addition to the grocery store, that corresponding or related residential uses were of use and would benefit the community, we would not oppose that. But certainly the focus right now is for the grocery store component.
So just help me understand, prestige employment. So I'm guessing prestige employment doesn't allow a grocery store.
To your question, Mr. Mayor, no, it really limits, it does allow some limited retail, but it kind of really says it has to be or supporting the primary employment uses within that designation and on those lands. It's really meant to be ancillary. So it really wouldn't allow for, I'll call a standalone retail or grocery store use there.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Does any other member of council have any questions for Mr. Waterhouse? Seeing, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Waterhouse, for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
So moving on to the report, we have 7.4 departmental reports, 7.4.2 Envision Durham Municipal Comprehensive Review Town of Ajax position on request for employment area conversions as amended. Moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Bauer. The council received the staff report entitled Envision Durham Municipal Comprehensive Review Town of Ajax position on request for employment area conversions for information, and that council endorsed staff's positions of each respective employment area conversion request as presented in attachment 1, Town of Ajax employment area conversion request as follows. I won't read them all. 3, that as directed by council during a special council meeting held February 11, 2021, staff notified the Region of Durham Planning and Economic Development Department that the town supports conversion requests 7, 15, 19, 20, and 33, subject to amendments and conditions outlined in attachment 2, and that a copy of this staff report and attached be forwarded to the Region of Durham Planning and Economic Development Department. Questions, please. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. The first proponent had made the suggestion of deferring the decision of this. Through the chair to staff, I was under the impression that we're out of time for all intents and purposes on making this decision. Like, is there an option to defer, or pretty much these comments and these decisions by the lower tier have to be submitted to the region ASAP?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee. Staff have provided their comments on all the requests submitted to the municipality, and council has made their decision on those requests and amended those that they chose to. So it's in council's hands if they choose to make any further changes to the requests that have been put forward.
But I guess a motion to defer, and can you walk council through how that would work then in terms of timing? Because I was under the impression the region is making a decision, like the planning committee, we received a large binder full of these submissions. Will it make it into that the decision for the planning committee and then the decision for regional council as a whole, or like if we were to defer it for next month, is that a possibility? Or I'm not sure. I was under the impression that we didn't have that kind of time.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, through the mayor to Regional Councillor Lee, the timeline for this matter to be returned to the region is the end of this month, from what I understand.
Right. Okay. That's what I was under the impression as well. And, just I agree with Regional Councillor Crawford that the first proponent, that one seemed like a good idea in 25 years. I don't know, the number, but just right now, you can't make a left turn on Harwood easily, and adding 160 units or 160 vehicles, I don't think would make it any easier. That light on Rosslyn, it does hold up traffic one way or the other from making it easy to get in and out of that plaza. So I like the idea in principle, but just I don't think I can support it as is with the current conditions now, especially if we don't have more time. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of council? Councilor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking about the CNR 09 presentation. So what we're doing now is submitting our comments. Does not mean that they will be accepted at the region as is, correct? Is that right? Okay. And Mr. Waterhouse, I believe, said that the plan would be to build a grocery store at Shoal Point and Clayton. And that's why we would want that conversion. He was requesting that conversion. And the townhouses in Stormwater Pond are no longer being considered. The priority would be a grocery store. And I'm sorry I didn't ask him at that time. I was thinking about all of those things. Is that what I understand? And how many jobs does that create?
Mr. Romanowski?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bauer, I can't comment on the number of jobs, but the stormwater management pond is a requirement of the development of these developments, the Daste, Finch Rose, and Chieftain developments as a whole, as the stormwater needs to get over through this facility and cross Shoal Point Road and get into the Carruthers Creek. So that pond's not going anywhere. Likewise, the lighter house that's at the corner of Shoal Point Road and Bailey, that's remaining. I believe the conversion request or the discussion this evening was just dealing with the employment piece that is fronting on to Bailey and flanked by Clayton on the east side.
Right.
Or Shoal Point and Bailey.
Shoal Point and...
the realignment of Shoal Point, pardon me.
Okay, thank you. You know that I have to agree that a grocery store larger than the 500, was it whatever the cap is right now with policy 618, makes sense to me in that area. That is a growing area. Currently, many of the residents turn right to go to the metro in Whitby because it's a little straightforward, less lights, than turning left to go to the No Frills or the Food Basics. I'm guessing. And I'd rather them shop in Ajax if they could. And I think it is an underserved area that could really benefit from a large grocery store. So I think I would like to see this request approved so that that option would become available to that builder. Is it time? Would I be able to make that amendment now?
Yeah, you can make an amendment if you choose on CNR 09.
Yes, then I would like to, Mayor, please. We
So your
accept that.
amendment is that conversion request CNR 09 be supported.
Yes, as it was presented tonight. And I guess I would follow that up with my comments, repeating what the mayor had said when he spoke to the first proponent, is what kind of guarantee can be offered that that's what we're going to be getting.
Well,
And I
that
guess
would
I
be
should
a
have asked
question
that
for the
Mr.
delegate.
Waterhouse. Absolutely. I don't know if we can ask him to come back and speak to those questions. I think I asked a couple now that I probably should have asked him, that I thought of them at the time.
Let's see if Mr. Romanowski or Mr. McCullough can field these for now, because I think they can speak to them. The other amendments that we did or the other motions that we did had a number of conditions on them.
Yes.
I had a few questions that I wanted to ask staff on these as well, which may shed some light on this.
I would be happy to ask you to step forward now if you would like to.
Well, did any other member of council have questions first on the amendment?
Sorry, I need a seconder, Chair.
Yes, it needs a seconder.
So I will, just to put on the floor, I'll second it.
Councilor Lee seconding.
Thank you.
Mr. Romanowski.
Mr. Mayor, I think Joanne had her hand up. I'm not sure if you saw it or not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
She
didn't see
did.
it. Councilor Dice.
It wasn't on the amendment, though.
Okay.
It was for staff prior to that. It's okay.
On the amendment, Mr. Romanowski, on the prestige employment, I asked the delegate the question, why wouldn't a grocery store be allowed on there? Can you add anything to that and let us know what would need to be done to allow a more substantial grocery store on there?
Through the mayor, to the mayor, I will ask that Sean McCullough, who's on the line, supervisor, policy planning and research, to field these questions.
Okay, Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, Mr. Romanowski. To you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, the prestige employment, as the Mr. Waterhouse identified, the prestige employment zone only permits retail uses associated with employment uses. Staff had recommended that the 500 meter permissions be granted to allow retail uses in prestige employments zone designation, as that's currently not permitted by the region. If there was a request to the region to allow either a site-specific situation here in this location to permit a larger retail store, that's certainly something that could be requested from the region. The alternative would be, as Mr. Waterhouse had requested, that if the site were to be designated in the region's official plan to living area, that would permit the grocery store. However, it would also permit residential uses.
So I don't want residential uses there. So if we wanted to, and the delegate clearly said they would like some residential uses there. So I'm wondering, how could we do this to allow a larger grocery store but not open us up to the full conversion? Is it just a matter of requesting to the region that use be added to the regional official plan?
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. You can be specific to request the maximum floor area for the retail store in this situation, and you can make that request to the region. Again, it would be up to the region to make that decision, but it's certainly something that you can ask.
Okay, and I'm just trying to make sure that Councilor Bauer has the right wording. So the wording to just say that the recommendation remove and that staff be directed to advise that Ajax Council supports the conversion request, I don't think would be accurate. I don't think we support the conversion request. I think we would support requesting the region to allow expanded floor area and permit the use for a grocery store. Would that be a better way to put that, do you think?
To Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. Councilor Bauer, I don't know if that helped answer your question or not.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That's I would agree with you that a grocery store would be appropriate there, but not townhouses.
So I don't know if you want to, if that's a friendly amendment or if you would consider that. I think the clerk is adjusting to more fit what I think you were trying to do.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could get a re-clarification on the exact terms, it would be appreciated.
So the staff be directed to advise the region of Durham that Ajax Council is in support of expanded floor area with respect to, so for the use of a grocery store.
Yeah, to permit
To permit
size grocery store, yeah.
Does that cover it? Does that
cover it, Mr. McCullough?
To Mr. Mayor, yes, I think that would cover it. And staff can certainly work with the applicant if needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCullough. Thank you, Mayor, for your help getting the wording
No, I
proper.
appreciate you bringing that forward, Councilor Bauer. That's exactly what I was thinking for that property as well, without opening us up to complete residential. So is there anything further discussion on the amendment to the report? Councilor Tyler Moore.
I just think it's a good amendment, and that area definitely needs more commercial infrastructure like grocery store. So I will be in support of this. And thanks, Lisa, for bringing it up. I have friends down there that tell me they have to shop
So do
in
I.
Whitby. Yes, you do have friends down there. So I will be supporting this. Good amendment.
Okay, anything further on the amendment? Hearing, seeing none. Those in favor of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any opposed? That's carried. Are there any further amendments on, or does anybody wish to speak on the report? Councilor Bauer.
I do, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. One of the amendments that we had at the special meeting on the 11th, we added a point of gaining a legal opinion for minutes of settlement. And I was just wondering if there's any update to that question, please. I forget which amendment it was, which application.
I'm not sure if that's going to be CEO Baker or Mr. Romanowski. I do know that we received some unfortunate news that one of the lawyers we've been consulting with actually passed away on Valentine's Day.
Oh, no.
So I'm not sure if that has affected it, but Mr. Baker, would you be able to speak to that, please?
I'm sorry, Councillor, could you repeat the question again for me?
Yes, one of the amendments that we made at the February 11th workshop was regarding a conversion, and one of the conditions was receiving the legal opinion that minutes of settlement that are currently in place with the town would not be affected. And I think it was the little, I should have looked it up.
I believe it was Councilor Bauer asking that if we allowed the conversion, and given that there's minutes of settlement, would that put the town in a legal position?
Yes,
would it
correct.
put it in any sort of liability was the question. And I think CEO Baker, we were going to get an opinion on that. That was one of the conditions.
Yes, so I'm going to ask Sean McCullough to answer because I think he was in taking up this work.
Okay,
Mr. Baker, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bauer, we were able to get a preliminary legal opinion on the process to review the minutes of settlement. There would be a requirement to amend the minutes of settlement, and there would be a process to go through that. We would also have to reopen the draft plan of subdivision and examine the draft conditions associated with the subdivision. It can be done. It will be complicated, but it certainly can be done. And there was an indication in the legal opinion that it would not leave the town in a compromising position. However, we would have to review the decision and making sure that all aspects are addressed.
Thank you. And I found it was CNR 19, and you have answered my question, and I appreciate you getting that done. Thank you. That's everything for me, Mayor.
Anything further on the report? Hearing and seeing none. Those in favor of the recommendations as amended? I see 5. That's enough. That carries. Moving on to 7.4 Departmental Report, 7.43 Anti-Racism and Diversity Training Plan for Council. Moved by Councillor Dye, second by Councillor Khan, that staff be directed to implement the Council Anti-Racism and Diversity Training Plan as described in this report. And Councillor Bauer, I believe you had a minor amendment.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Great report. Thank you very much. I would like to move that we switch phase 1 and phase 2, the order of them. So the unconscious bias training, I believe, should be the first training program. Sorry, I lost my words. That we go through before we move into the anti-Black racism training. In my opinion, the unconscious bias training will really open us. I think it will teach us. We will set the stage for the ongoing training that follows, in my opinion.
We need a seconder, please.
Councillor Lee.
I'm trying to think. I actually saw Councillor Tyler Morin first. So second by Councillor Tyler Morin. Any questions? Can I just ask if Ms. Sharma is on, if that causes any issues? I don't think it does, but can you just confirm that reversing those first 2 in priority wouldn't cause any problems with the program?
Hi, through the chair, I'm online, but it does not cause any problems as it stands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing, seeing none. Those in favor? That carries. On the item, on the report as amended. Those in favor of the report? That carries.
Thank you.
Good amendment. The Ajax 7.4.4 Ajax Shining Star Bursary Program update, moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Bauer. The following Ajax Shining Star Bursary Program update report be received by Council for information. Questions or comments on the report? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Those in favor of the recommendations? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 7.4.5 Smart Cities Pilot Project and Grant Application, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Khan. The council directs staff to apply for the Federation of Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program grant of $24,000 to support the implementation of data collection pilot project partnership with Bell Canada. The council approved use of $6,000 from the capital contingency reserve towards the town's contribution, contingent upon grant approval, and that council authorized staff to complete the necessary actions to formalize the partnership. Oh, that's a mistake. And the town and Bell Canada for a 1-year pilot project contingent upon grant approval. Does anybody want to speak to this? I have a minor amendment. Councillor Lee?
I guess my question, I'm not sure, this might go to LIS, but do we currently have a framework for data protection as it pertains to smart city initiatives?
I guess that is LIS. Ms. Cooper, are you able to answer that?
I'll try. So, sorry, the question was, do we have a framework for data protection as it relates to smart city initiatives?
Right. Or in fact, consumer data protection in general.
Yeah, so we do have, or through you, Mr. Mayor, Regional Councillor Lee, we do have privacy policies in place that govern the manner in which we collect and use and the ways in which we protect personal information and other information that we collect. Traditionally, those policies have applied to sort of more less modern means of data collection than we're seeing now. So we definitely are just sort of at the infancy of thinking a lot more about the types of data that we're collecting, either knowingly and unknowingly, through the various technology products that we use, and making sure that we're protecting it in all the appropriate ways. Some of the talent that we've added to our IT group in the last year really specializes in the area of data collection and privacy. So that's definitely a lens that we are applying all the time, every time that we enter into projects like this and any new technology projects. And this particular project has been pardon me, it's getting late. Those who initiated did meet with the IT group, and they had considered all the privacy implications of it and didn't have any concerns.
Okay, thank you. That is where I was going with this. So thank you for answering the question. This one is pretty innocuous. It's trash collection, so that's fine. But I just want to caution council of, just as we begin to modernize our smart cities approach, it's fantastic. Smart cities, it's a very sexy thing to sell to constituents of, modernizing our lives and simplifying our lives. But at the same time, there's always a cost that is never kind of explicit, and that is the protection of privacy. So, I'm very much a tech proponent. I support tech. I support the modernization of the town. But I also am very cognizant that not everyone in the town is comfortable with the amount of information these companies are collecting. It seems like just trash collection, but obviously Bell Canada, there's a benefit to them that on top of this. So I support. I imagine I know where the mayor's amendment is going, so I support it. But I just want to starting now, set a cautionary tone of going forward for smart cities. Those are a lot of the questions I'll be asking: is, are we protecting our constituents' privacy? Are they the end? Who's the end user? Where the data is being stored? Who has access to that data? So I'll just leave it at that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Through the
Anybody
chair.
else? Sorry?
Oh, sorry, through the chair, it's Cass. Can I just add on to answer a little bit more from Councillor Lee's question? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Lee, for the comments, and definitely are taken by staff. And as Director Cooper mentioned, we did meet with the IT group and had a conversation about exactly the concerns that you had raised, if there were any privacy concerns. This pilot in particular, the only data that's being collected are things like the spill levels of the garbage bins, things like if the bin catches on fire, if the bin is tipped over. That's the kind of data that's being collected, and the Bell's involvement is that data is being transmitted by Bell's 5G network. So there is an element of this proposal that does have us using Bell's network, but the data that's being stored and collected does not involve any resident personal information or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that council knows that, but the point is definitely taken about the sort of longer term implications, and I'm sure that as Director Cooper said, IT will be playing a very big role if we go down the path with other projects.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I just have a minor amendment, and then I'll just speak to it quickly. I would like to add, Mr. Clerk, at the end of item number 1, if the grant application is unsuccessful, then 24,000 be allocated from the capital contingency reserve. And at the end of paragraph section 2, removal of the contingent upon grant approval. Those 4 words, and I'll just speak to it quickly. We've been talking about. Oh, I need a seconder, please. Okay, pick one. Councillor Lee, I saw you first, and Councillor Dyes, please take over as chair. So I'll just speak to it quickly. We've been talking about smart cities initiatives for our first 2 years. It's part of our strat plan. This is a fairly modest number to do something that I think will help give us the data and help us move this forward. I also recognize that there are potential savings here in operations with only having to pick up the garbage when it's full and taking less trips, which will help us cut our emissions as well as potentially save some staff time. So I look at this as a bit of an investment in a couple of different ways. And I think it's important enough that with or without the grant, it should go ahead. So that's why I bring forward those amendments, and I'll just ask for your support, please.
Are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I guess through the chair to staff, do we imagine we will see $30,000 in value from this service should we not get the grant?
Through the chair, I can take a crack at that first, and then perhaps Director Meredith might have some additional comments. You know, this project in its kind of first phases for us will really be a data collection exercise for staff. So it will, as the mayor mentioned, take note of where the fill levels are in the grander context of when operations does their rounds to clean up and empty the receptacles in our park system. So with that information comes a lot of data, and it, you know, from the proposal that was shared with us by Bell, they have some pretty compelling information on bins that get picked up when they're at 20% capacity, for example, versus, you know, the ideal rate or sort of fill rate, which is around that 75% mark. So getting that information and understanding where we are is, I think certainly a value add to the town. And as I mentioned in the report, that any sort of further investment into this, whether that is some, you know, GPS routing technology for operations, or a further expansion of these sensors, if we find they're very helpful, that you know, would be brought back to council through the standard budgeting process. So this $30,000 again is for a pilot project. And I would just say that other municipalities, including Markham, I believe, have gone this route in a very similar partnership with Bell with the same grant application. And we've been advised, you know, that other municipalities have been successful for this data collection pilot that is done. So I'm not sure if Dr. Meredith has anything specifics in terms of operations to add, but I just wanted to make it clear that this is a data collecting exercise that staff feel, you know, will provide us with some good information on how to make future investments.
Mr. Meredith? Oh, I'm not chairing.
No. You're quick though.
It's Nicole here. I believe Mr. Meredith's screen has frozen, so I don't know that he'll be able to respond just this moment.
Okay, then are there any other questions? I can't see everybody, so you have to speak up. There's a few of you missing.
No questions from me, Chair.
No questions from me, Chair. Madam Chair.
I can see everybody and there's no hands.
Okay. Well, I guess we have no choice but to go ahead then. I don't know.
Chair, please call to vote. I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm good with the answer. Thank you.
All right. So on the amendment, all in favor? Are there any opposed? So I can't see Marilyn. I think that was carried.
She put her hand up.
Okay, thank you. It's carried. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Councillor Dyes. On the next one, 7.4.6, the 2021 report on non-cash expenses as required by Ontario Regulation 284/09, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Dyes, that the report on excluded non-cash expenses as required by Ontario Reg 284/09 be received for information. Questions or comments? It's a very exciting one. No? All right, those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And finally, Mr. Clerk, the item 7.4.7, since the budget is already approved, do we need to, is this now just void, this carry forward from the January 18th?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The direction provided at the 2021 operating capital budget meeting that was ratified earlier provides a different grant amount. So the recommendations in the report that was referred from the January meeting is null and withdrawn.
Thank you. Moving on to regional council reports. Who has a regional council report? Awesome. Just very quickly, Finance Committee has approved all the budgets submitted by all the different departments, and that will be going forward to our budget meeting next week. The projected is 1.97, so came in slightly under the 2% target. So that's all I'll say to that.
I'm sure there'll be no questions at regional council about the budget then, right, Chair?
Well, I certainly hope not.
Should be a really quick one.
Yeah, I've hoped that for the last 10 years and it never works out that way. Moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Tyler Moran, that the Regional Council's report of February 22nd, 2021 be received for information. Those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to business arising from notice of motion. I have a motion to suspend the rules of procedure. It does require 2/3. Moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Tyler Moran, that the rules of procedure be suspended in order to introduce a motion without notice regarding in-store alcohol service at convenience stores. Those in favor? I require 5. I see 6. That carries. Thank you. Moving on to the first motion, gas-fired electricity, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Lee. Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion comes out of a committee that I sit on from at the region, the Durham Region Roundtable on Climate Change Committee. And we had a presentation from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. And in that presentation, they were talking about how many municipalities, well, at least 2 that I know of for sure, Guelph and Kingston, have come forward with this motion to have, sorry, I'm just going to go to it here. To have the, to ask the Ontario government to reduce the use of the Ontario gas-fired power plants by 30% by 2040. And I thought that since council has made a motion, I believe it was in our first year of the state of emergency in the climate, I thought it was time that perhaps we put a little bit of another motion forward to support that motion that we did. I think it was in our first year. So I'm just looking for council support on this particular motion.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this? Hearing, seeing none. Those in favor of the motion? I see 6 hands. That's carried. Moving on to the next business arising from notice of motion, Durham Scarborough BRT and Pickering Village, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Tyler Moran. Go ahead, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you again, Your Worship. We had a report from Works talking about land acquisitions and whatnot through the BRT. I was actually approached by someone that is newly hired at the region to talk about next steps with the BRT through the village. And this motion in no way supports the idea of losing a car lane through the village, but also recognizes that this will happen whether we support that or not. So we have been advised that we should get together with staff and start to decide how we would like Metrolinx to look as it goes through the village, creating that still that that heritage theme and preserving the look, and perhaps any land acquisition that needs to be done, that when it's replaced in the spirit of the heritage village. So I'm hoping that you would support this so that we can get on this. My understanding is the earlier we get in with our requests, the better chance that we have to actually be successful with it. And we know that this is going to happen, so we just want it to be the best for the village as possible. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay. Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, absolutely. This motion is very important to us. It's very important to me and to Marilyn and to everyone in the town. Everyone is very concerned. Some people are excited, some people are mad. It's very important that we stay at the table with Metrolinx, with the region. We discuss every single thing we can get done to the max of our power, maybe some legacy projects, you know, a new entrance into the town. We're going to try and make this as best as possible. And this motion speaks to us staying at the table throughout the process. And I hope we can get support for this from the other members of council, because it does affect us all here in the town of Ajax. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, anything further? I just absolutely agree. It's very important that we maintain that historical content in the village, and you know, having the stops and everything else sort of fit is very, very important. So absolutely support this. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next one is mine, so I'll turn over the chair to Councillor Lee, because Councillor Dyes, you are seconding this. This is to do with the Conservation Authority's Working Group, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dyes. And just therefore, the Ajax Council convey their concern to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, requesting that the province remove the influence of the development industry from the working group, instead having them provide their input as part of the public consultation process like other stakeholders and the general public. And that we request that the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks consider adding environmental protection focused non-governmental agencies onto the working group. This just speaks to after Bill 229 Section 6 came out and the provincial government has created this now working group to advise them, having a lot of developers, no disrespect intended, but it's kind of like putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop. I'll put it like that. I think they've taken a lot of the power away from the conservation authorities with Section 6. And now I think having the input not come from the conservation authorities primarily and coming from other sources is not the way to go. And I don't need to give the examples of some of the other areas where we are going in a very bad way. So I'll leave it at that and ask for your support.
Great. Regional Councillor Dyes is the seconder. Did you want to speak on this?
I do, thank you. Sitting on the board of the TRCA, I recognize how important it is to have non-governmental agencies or residents around the table who have expertise on environmental issues. And this specifically was struck, this working group, to look at programs and services to be delivered, services of conservation authorities. So we really need that non-governmental environmental agencies there with their expertise to guide us through some of those decisions. They are also going to be looking at how these things are funded. And I think that's really important too, because I don't want the development industry saying, oh, I'll fund that, because that would be a very biased approach. I think that there has to be a fulsome and balanced discussion around the table. And I think this is a good way to do that. So thank you.
Would any other member of council like to speak on this? Then we'll call to vote though. Then all in favor? Any opposed? And that passes 7-0. I'll hand the chair back to the mayor.
Actually, hand it to Councillor Dyes.
I will hand it to Regional Councillor Dyes.
This was the motion to do with the relaxing of the rules. And since it was not printed in the agenda, I will just read it quickly. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Khan. Whereas Ajax Council recognizes the ongoing hardships faced by restaurants, pubs, and other food service businesses as a result of mandated closures and patron limits due to COVID-19. And whereas the town has been working hard to implement and advocate for business support, such as providing restaurants the ability to access wine, beer, and spirits at wholesale or discounted pricing, permitting flexibility, online support, and more to ensure more local businesses survive the pandemic. And whereas convenience stores have not been mandated to close during the pandemic and have not endured undue hardship like other industries. And whereas 7-Eleven Canada has applied to introduce in-store alcohol service at 61 stores throughout Ontario, including Ajax, to leverage their open status as a competitive advantage. And whereas the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario is ultimately responsible for granting all liquor licensing requests. And whereas approval of 7-Eleven's request would also mean exposing an already vulnerable and hard-hit restaurant bar industry to further competition. And whereas Ontario Big City Mayor's Caucus passed a motion on Friday, February 19th, opposed to the 7-Eleven Canada request to serve alcohol. Therefore, be it now resolved that Ajax Council oppose 7-Eleven Canada's proposal to serve alcohol, and that this motion be distributed to Honorable Peter Bethenfalvey, Minister of Finance, Honorable Doug Downey, Attorney General, Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Honorable Pradmeet Zakaria, Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction, Rod Phillips, MPP for Ajax, the region of Durham and local Durham region municipalities. And I'll just speak to it very quickly. I did bring this to the big city mayors on Friday and it passed almost unanimously except for one. We all recognize that bars and restaurants have suffered probably the most, one of the most through this. And, adding this competition at this stage would be really detrimental. But further, I mean, using the location in Ajax, it backs right onto residential. It's right by two major high schools. I couldn't think of probably a worse location. And the thought of, go fill up with gas and go sit at the bar and have a drink at the same time just doesn't really sit right to me. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but I'm pretty sure we have bylaws that designate how far a bar can be to residential and to daycares and to schools and that type of thing. So I don't think their application takes any of these into account. And it's just, to me, a bad idea. And to all of the big city mayors, it was a bad idea, except for one. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Khan, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we've discussed this thoroughly. That 7-Eleven is not hurting for business. We've all been working personally to support our restaurants, our staff, the business development area, Don Terry, they've all been working very, very hard to support restaurants. And 7-Eleven, I don't think they're hurting. But of course, I have 3 kids that has been through those schools right across from those high schools. And I don't want that extra problem to worry if I know it's easy enough to get alcohol, but I don't want to make it that easy for my children and the children of Ajatians. So I'm strongly in support. Obviously, I seconded that motion. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Tyler Moran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very happy that the mayor brought this forward and Councillor Collin is seconding it. It's an important motion. As just echoing what everyone says, I have a daughter on the one side that goes to Notre Dame, and she's in 7-Eleven sometimes with her friends. The last thing I want is a bar in 7-Eleven. And I'm very happy that the mayor, and as well as Councillor Khan, has spoken and looked through the lens of the local pub owner, the bar owner, the restaurant owner I'm infinitely associated with. They are hanging on by a thread, and every single chance we get on this council to help them, to protect them, I'm very glad to see this motion come to fruition, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. You'd be surprised how often I'm asked by residents of who want to, get a large slushy and then follow it up with a glass of beer. I mean, it's just so many. I can't even count them all. But that said, I do have to disagree with those one constituents who probably has that. I'm going to just take the opposite stance of I don't know what this government is thinking, that this is any sort of a priority for any municipality. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know all 69 locations of all 7-Elevens, but in Ajax, there's no need for this. I think of all the priorities we wish this government were focusing on, this would probably not even make any sort of list. So thanks for bringing it up. It shouldn't have to be said, but it is. We got to make an official stance. So this is ridiculous. And so I'm glad we are passing this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Mayor Collier?
I just forgot one thing to add. I did see something come out from the province. Staff shared it with me, which actually, it sounded a lot like they thought it was a good idea. Yes, let's encourage more business. So I think it is even more important that they hear back some strong messages from municipalities that are going to be affected, because I don't hear any consultation process happening here either. And I think we should be consulting with those in the community that are affected. Thank you.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is actually a link where the public can put in their comments to the body. I had sent it to a resident that had contacted me, so I'm sure we could provide that to our residents also through some sort of format, or maybe even an IMO. I'm not really sure, but I know that there is a process similar to where we put cannabis up. It's a similar process where residents can put their comments in.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? Excuse me. Doesn't look like anybody is opposed there. Thank you. So
Thank
back
you.
to you, Mayor Collier.
Great job, Councillor Dias. Thank
But
you.
I just want to let you know I do have a notice of motion.
We're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to bylaws, moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Lee. The bylaws number 11-2021 to 17-2021 be read a first, second, third time and pass. Questions? Councillor Crawford?
I have a question about the one on Smales Drive, 17-2021. They're talking in this bylaw about stop up and close part of Smales Drive. Can someone clarify what that means? And also, have any residents been notified of this? I don't think I've ever questioned a bylaw in all of the meetings that I've ever been to. And when I read this, I thought, oh, I don't know how that works. Can someone explain it to me?
Mr. McCullough or Mr.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to Regional Councillor Crawford. These bylaws are associated with two reports that Council received with regards to 105 Rosslyn Road development. These are the leftover parcels to complete the road pattern as part of that development, which this Council's approved the official plan and zoning and the site plan application, which came back to Council for their approval. These were the bylaws that were associated with that development proposal, which this Council has seen on 2 occasions.
Okay, so saying that it's been associated with 105 Roslyn, that's what I thought, but I was just wanting to make sure when I read that. So, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councillor Lee, I saw your hand. No, okay. Any other questions on the bylaws? Okay, seeing, hearing none. Those in favor of approval? There we go. That's carried. Any notices of motion? Councillor Dias.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Given the province's recent announcement to grow the green belt, I thought it was appropriate to bring notice of a motion to reconfirm the town's position to include the headwaters of the Carruthers. It is one of the 21 rivers, valleys that they are talking about, and we've always been very concerned. So I'm going to also request that staff be directed to comment on the town's position to Council and to provide some comments for the EBR as well. So that would be the I think it's March 22nd meeting.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Coming out of GDC, where our diversity and inclusion coordinator was kind of going over some points of improvement of just like her listening tour and feedback. One thing I've heard from staff, town, and constituents is that there's a perception of a diversity problem within the town of Ajax, within the Durham region. So my motion is in regards to getting HR to just review its practices to ensure that they're modernized and they are reflective and capturing a large breadth of applicants and not just a cookie cutter mold. And so that is my motion coming up in March as well.
Okay. Any others? I will have 2. One is directing staff to investigate and report back to Council on the feasibility of acquiring the lands for the Hunt Street extension and possible different ways that could be potentially financed or work with a partner on. So that is one that we're working on. The other is looking at a land bank tax. And we are all aware of the many landowners that continue to have vacant land that sit and are not developed, just waiting for the values to appreciate. Well, that's fine. However, that does have an effect and a monetary effect on the town and the residents as well. So if they're going to sit, then we want to look at some sort of benefit to the town. So those will be coming forward as well. Any further? Okay, hearing, seeing none. We have the confirming, any new business or announcements, sorry. Any open houses coming up, Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. This Thursday evening is the Ward 3 traffic calming implementation public open house from 7 to 8. It's a virtual meeting. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I do believe registration is required, so you'll have to check the town's website for that information.
Okay, any other notices, Councillor Khan?
And this Wednesday is Ward 2's traffic calming implementation public open house. And it starts at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lee?
I suppose I should have done this in January, but I forgot, to be honest. February 12th was Chinese New Year, or Lunar New Year, if you are not Chinese. I just want to wish everyone a Gong Hei Fa Choi and a Sun Lim Fai Lo. I think I'm somewhat obligated to do that every year. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further announcements? I'll just do one. This Thursday, February 25th at 1 p.m., want to invite everybody to In Conversation with the Ajax Anti-Black Racism Task Force. This is an online event at ajax.ca/taskforce. And it's In Conversation with Ajax Anti-Black Racism Task Force. Join us online to hear from the Black community on the significance of Black History Month and why it's important to celebrate. So please join us online for that event on Thursday. Anything further? Nothing further. Moving on to confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Khan. The bylaw number 18-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of Town of Ajax at its regular meeting held on February 22nd, be read a first, second, third time and pass. Questions? Those in favor? Carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Dye, second by Councillor Khan, that the February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Council of the Town of Ajax be adjourned. Those in favor? There you go. That's carried.